Welcome back to the deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us today because we are tackling a subject that, quite frankly, strikes absolute fear into the hearts of medical students, nursing students, and even seasoned clinicians everywhere.
It really does. It's the elephant in the room of internal medicine, or I guess more accurately, the alphabet soup in the room.
We're talking, of course, about the liver, and specifically the absolute nightmare that is viral hepatitis. You have A, B, C, D, E, and, just when you think you've memorized the list, they throw G at you just for fun.
There's a lot to take in, and the reason it is so dreaded isn't just the number of viruses, it's the charts. I mean, if you open a standard textbook, you are just assaulted by these terrifying serology graphs.
Oh, totally. Lines going up, lines crossing over, dashed lines, solid lines.
And you're sitting there trying to remember, does antigen positive mean I'm sick right now? Does antibody positive mean I'm cured, or does it mean I'm a carrier?
Yeah, it feels less like studying medicine and more like trying to break a complex encryption code, like while a bomb is ticking down.
Exactly. One wrong move, one wrong interpretation of a lab value, and you've misdiagnosed the patient. It's high stakes.
Which is why today is going to be different. We are going to fix that. We are diving into Chapter 25, Hepatitis Viridae, from the absolute classic text, Clinical Microbiology, made ridiculously simple.
And our mission today is to completely reject that memorize the list approach. It just doesn't work.
It really doesn't.
Right. So we're going to use the visual logic that this specific chapter lays out. Because the liver isn't random, the viruses aren't random, there is a narrative arc to a liver infection.
The narrative arc, I like that.
Yeah, if you can visualize what is physically happening to the liver cell, the actual crime scene, the charts stop being random lines, they become a timeline of the battle.
So that's the goal. We aren't just memorizing letters, we are decoding the liver's reaction to an invasion. We're going to look at the diagrams, and I mean, literally, we are going to describe the pictures in the book because they're brilliant, and we're going to break down the Dane particle in that infamous window period.
And this matters so much. It matters because in a clinical setting, you never actually see the virus. You don't look at a patient and see a hepatitis B virion floating around their head.
Right.
You see the clues. You see yellow eyes or maybe just vague fatigue, and you see elevated enzymes on a blood test. You have to work backward from the debris to figure out who the intruder is.
So let's start with the crime scene itself, the liver. The book opens with this set of diagrams that completely changed how I look at liver function tests.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic.
I want to paint this picture for you because if you can see this in your mind's eye, everything else just, it falls into place.
Let's do it. This is the physiological basis for everything we're about to discuss.
Okay, so visualize a cross-section of the liver. In the book's illustration image 2, for those playing along at home, we have these rows of purple hexagonal cells. Those are the hepatocytes.
Workers. These are the cells doing all the metabolic heavy lifting.
Right, so you have these purple cells on the left and the right, and running right between them, down the middle like a river, is a bright yellow road. That's the intrahepatic bile duct.
Purple cells on the flanks, yellow tube down the center. Simple enough.
Now, here is where the specific labels matter. This is the key. Floating inside those purple cells, safe and sound, are two specific enzymes, AST and ALT. Think of them like the furniture inside the house.
Correct. AST, which is also known as SGOT, and ALT, or SGPT. These are intracellular enzymes. They are supposed to stay inside the hepatocyte.
If they're outside.
If they're outside, something has gone very, very wrong.
Okay. Meanwhile, lining the walls of that yellow bile duct are different markers. ALK-PHOS, that's alkaline, phosphatase, and GGT. They are like the wallpaper of the duct.
And flowing down the yellow river.
Is, of course, bilirubin or bili.
So the setup is crucial. A stalter inside the cell, ALK-PHOS and GDT are on the duct walls, BLL is in the duct. Now, let's introduce a virus.
This is image 3 in the source material, and it's labeled viral hepatitis. It shows the timeline of the attack. And first, we have an arrow pointing to early change. The virus, let's say it's Hep A or B, attacks those purple hepatocytes. And what happens?
Well, the diagram depicts an explosion. The cell membrane just ruptures. It's something called cytolysis.
It literally looks like the cells are popping. And because they pop, all that furniture, the AST and ALT, it just spills out into the blood.
This is the aha moment. I mean, this explains why in the very early stages of viral hepatitis, the very first thing you see on a lab test is a massive spike in AST and ALT.
The cells are bursting.
It's a bag of enzymes spilling open. That's all it is.
But the diagram doesn't stop there. It shows a later change. The cells that didn't burst are now, well, they're angry. They are depicted as swollen and puffy.
Cellular edema. And
Yeah.
this is a plumbing problem. If the purple cells on either side of that yellow road swell up, what do? They push inward.
They squeeze the duct.
They compress the bile duct.
It's like stepping on a garden hose.
Exactly. So now the flow of bile is obstructed. It backs up. The bilirubin backs up into the blood, and that's what causes jaundice, the yellow eyes.
And what about the duct markers?
Well, because the duct walls are being squeezed and irritated, they start to release their markers, alkaline phosphatase and GGT.
So the timeline of the enzymes tells you the story of the pathology. It's not random.
Not at all.
Early on, the cells burst, so you get high AST and ALT. Later on, the swelling blocks the tubes, so you get high alk phos, GGT, and bilirubin.
Precisely. And the book contrasts this beautifully with image 4, which just shows a stone,
Yeah, this one is great. It just shows a big rock stuck in the yellow tube.
a gallstone. In that case, the hepatocytes aren't bursting, right? They're fine at first. The problem is purely mechanical blockage.
So the primary problem is the pipe, not the cells.
Exactly. So in an obstructive case like a gallstone, you see the alk phos, GGT, and bilirubin rise first and most significantly because the pipe is blocked directly rather than the cells bursting first.
Okay, so let's just recap that rule of thumb. If you see crazy high assault, you should be thinking cell damage. Probably viral.
Think viral, yes.
But if you see high alk phos and bili as the main drama, think duct damage. Think obstruction.
Or you could be in the late stage of viral hepatitis where the swelling has taken over.
Yeah.
But yes, that is the fundamental framework. Once you visualize where the enzymes live, you don't have to memorize the patterns. You just look at the anatomy.
Okay, that makes so much sense. Let's move from the anatomy to the specific viruses now. We're starting with hepatitis A. The A, I always heard, stands for acute, right?
Usually, yes. And it's the classic foodborne hepatitis. There's a mnemonic for that.
Vowels are for bowels, right?
Bowels are for bowels, exactly.
Yeah.
So Hep A and Hep E are transmitted fecal-orally.
Tasty. So let's look at the graph for hepatitis A. That's image 5. This is our first serology curve.
And thankfully, it's the simplest one. It's basically a single hump. It's a nice one to start with.
Okay, on the bottom, the x-axis, we've got a timeline in months. The first bar at the top says constitutional symptoms flu-like.
Right, and this is key. Before you turn yellow, you just feel crummy. You feel like you have the flu. Fever, malaise, nausea. This is often misdiagnosed as just, some random bug.
Then, about a month in, we see the bar for jaundice and elevated liver function tests. That's when the assault spike we just talked about really happens.
That's when people usually go to the doctor.
Right. But let's look at the antibodies. We have 2 lines here. A dashed line for IgM and a solid line for IgG.
This is immunology 101, but, applied. IgM is the dashed line that shoots up straight away. I always tell students to think of IgM as immediate.
Or I've heard Marine, like the first troops on the beach.
Marine, that's a good one too. It's the first responder.
So if you see IgM anti-HAV in the blood, what does that mean clinically?
It means the war is happening right now. The Marines are on the beach. The patient has an active acute infection, full stop.
Then the dashed line drops off pretty quickly after month 3 or 4. But the solid line, IgG, starts rising slowly and just. It stays high, it plateaus and never comes down.
Yep. IgG is the long-term memory.
Wow.
The book uses a great mnemonic here. G is for gone. If you see IgG, the virus is gone.
Or G is for greetings. It stays around to greet the virus if it ever tries to come back.
Exactly. It's your permanent immunity.
Okay, so clinical scenario. I order a Hep panel on a patient. I see anti-HAV IgG positive, but the IgM is negative.
Congratulations, your patient is immune. They either had the vaccine or they had the virus years ago and probably didn't even realize it. They are protected.
Simple enough. Okay, so hepatitis A is the warm-up act. Now we have to talk about the beast. Hepatitis B.
Hepatitis B is where students usually get overwhelmed, and for good reason. The virus is way more complex, and the serology is a total roller coaster.
The book helps us out by first showing us what the virus actually looks like. We're looking at image 7, the Dane particle.
Right. The Dane particle is the complete infectious hepatitis B virus. And the illustration is great. It looks like a little planet or maybe a donut with a hole.
It's got layers. Let's peel them back. On the very outside, we have the envelope. The book labels this HBsAg.
The surface antigen. I want you to think of this as the virus's spacesuit. It's the outer coat that protects it while it's floating through the blood.
Okay, the spacesuit, HBsAg. So inside the spacesuit, we have the person, or the capsid. The diagram labels this HBcAg.
The core antigen. This is the structural protein that holds the precious cargo, the DNA. It's deep inside.
Okay, so core is inside, surface is outside, and then inside that we have the DNA polymerase and the DNA itself. But there's a third piece floating around called HBeAg.
The E antigen. Now, this one's a little different. It's a soluble protein that is secreted by the infected cell. And I want you to associate E with explosion of virus or excreted, implying high infectivity activity.
So when the virus is really cooking.
Exactly. When the virus is actively replicating, making copies of itself like crazy, it just pumps out HBeAg into the blood.
So E equals high energy replication.
Perfect. If you have E antigen, you are highly infectious. You are a viral factory.
Now, the diagram makes an interesting distinction. It shows the whole Dane particle, which it says is 42 nanometers, but it also shows these smaller spheres that are just HBsAg, just the surface antigen. What's that about?
This is fascinating biology. The virus is, well, it's messy. It makes way more spacesuits, more surface antigen than it actually needs.
Why?
It's a decoy. So in the blood of an infected patient, you have some actual viruses, the Dane particles, but you have millions and millions of these empty spacesuits floating around just to distract and overwhelm the immune system.
That's devious. It's like deploying chaff from an airplane.
It is, and that's also why HBsAg, the surface antigen, is the first marker we can detect. There's just so much of it.
Okay, so we know the players. We have surface, the suit, core, the astronaut, and E, the activity level. Now we have to look at the graph in image 8. This is the acute hepatitis B curve, and it looks like a plate of spaghetti compared to the Hep A graph.
It does, but let's untangle it one noodle at a time. Let's start with the antigens, the bad guys.
Okay, looking at the graph, the first red line to rise is HBsAg, the surface antigen.
As we said, the spacesuits. If you test positive for HBsAg, the virus is in the building. You are infected. Period.
Yeah.
There's no ambiguity there.
Got it. Right next to it, underneath that curve, is a bar for HBeAg.
The E antigen. And notice it rises right alongside HBsAg. So the mnemonic from the book is E equals EEC. It's replicating, or active infection. It means business.
Then the immune system finally wakes up, the red line for HBsAg peaks, and then it starts to crash down. The body is winning, the virus is being cleared, and eventually the red line hits 0.
This is the recovery phase, so the virus is going away. But now we have to look at the other side of the story, the antibodies, the body's response.
Okay, the first antibody to show up on this graph is the dashed purple line, IgM anti-HBcAg, the core antibody.
This is critical. So critical. The immune system attacks the core, the astronaut, first. And it comes in 2 flavors. IgM, the first responder, and then later IgG.
Then, much later, I mean, we're talking month 6, month 7 on this graph, we finally see the appearance of the blue line, anti-HBs, the surface antibody.
This is the victory flag. The surface antibody neutralizes the spacesuit. Once you have this, you cannot be infected again. You have won the war. You are immune.
But wait, there is a gap. And this is the most famous trap in medical boards and, frankly, in clinical practice.
So the window period.
Let's look at the graph closely. Image 9 highlights this specifically. The red line, the surface antigen, it drops to 0 around month 5.
Yep.
Gone.
But the victory flag, the blue surface antibody, it doesn't appear until month 6 or 7. There is a month or 2 where neither of them is positive.
The mystery gap. And you have to imagine a patient walks into your clinic during this specific month. You order HBsAg, it's negative because the body has cleared most of the virus.
So you think they're okay. You might. Then you order anti-HBs. It's also negative because the body hasn't made enough of that neutralizing antibody to show up on the test yet.
So you tell the patient, good news, you don't have Hep B.
And you would be completely wrong. The patient is still recovering.
Yeah.
They still have recent infection markers. If you send them to donate blood, they could absolutely infect the blood supply.
So how do we see the invisible man? What is the only thing present during the window?
Look at that dashed line bridging the gap. It's the only thing there.
Yeah.
IgM, anti-HBeAg.
The core antibody.
Exactly. During the window period, the only marker of a recent infection is the IgM antibody against the core. That's why the text emphasizes over and over, core is central to the diagnosis.
Wow. That is a huge, huge takeaway. If you suspect Hep B, you can't just check the surface, you have to check the core.
You must check the core.
Yeah.
And just to round it out, if you look at the E antibody, anti-HB, it appears right after the E antigen disappears. It's just a sign that says, okay, the replication explosion is over. It's seroconversion.
Okay, let me try to summarize the Hep B curve then. 1, surface antigen, HBsAg means you have it, you're infected. 2, E antigen, HBsAg means it's replicating fast, you're highly infectious.
Perfect.
3, the core antibody, anti-HBc, is the first defense and Critically, it's the only thing you can see in the window period.
Right.
And 4, the surface antibody anti-HB means you beat it. You're cured and immune.
That's it. You've nailed it. And what if that surface antigen, that red line, never goes away? What if that red line stays high for more than 6 months?
You're chronic. You've lost the war, and the virus has moved in for good.
Correct. And that's a whole different, much more serious problem for the liver, leading to cirrhosis and cancer.
Now, speaking of moving in, let's talk about the squatter of the viral world, Hepatitis D.
Ah, the Delta agent. This one's a weird one.
The cartoon in image 10 is hilarious. It shows this little viral core-labeled nucleocapsid, and it's holding a big letter D, and it's standing next to a plus sign and a big HBsAg coat.
It's an equation. The equation is simple. The D core plus the B coat equals a complete infectious Delta virus.
Explain this. Why does D need B?
Hepatitis D is what we call a defective virus. It's incomplete. It cannot make its own envelope. It absolutely must steal the spacesuit, the HBsAg, from hepatitis B.
That is parasitic on a parasite.
It is. It's an amazing piece of biology. And this leads directly to the clinical implication. You can only get Hep D if you currently have an active Hep B infection.
That's called a co-infection.
Right. Or if you are already a chronic carrier of Hep B and then you get hit with D later, that's a superinfection, which is much more severe.
So the bottom line is?
No B, no D. Simple as that. You cannot have one without the other.
I love that logic. It just sticks in your brain. It makes it so much easier to remember. Okay, we've covered the big 3A, B, and the parasitic D, but the chapter also gives us frameworks for C, E, and G.
Right, and here the book does something very smart. Instead of giving us pages and pages of dense text for each one, it gives us comparative tables. That's images 11, 12, and 13.
And these tables have headers: morphology, transmission, clinical, serology. And they are set up so you can compare the viruses side by side.
And this is the key to studying. Even though the charts are just frameworks, you should be able to think about how to fill them in mentally based on the patterns we've already learned.
Let's try it. Let's look at transmission first.
Well, we already have our rule, right? A and E are the vowel viruses.
So they're for the bowels, fecal-oral.
Exactly. While the others, B, C, D, are transmitted through blood and body fluids.
Okay, and chronicity. Which ones stick around?
Well, A and E are usually acute. They follow that simple single hump curve like we saw in image 5. They come and they go.
B and C.
B and C are the ones famous for becoming chronic. They can follow that complex long-term timeline like in image 8. They're the ones that can cause lifelong problems.
So the advice for anyone listening is to use this compare and contrast method that the book's table structure gives you, rather than trying to memorize each virus in isolation.
Absolutely. Look for the patterns. Don't just memorize the facts.
Okay, we have unpacked a ton of serology today. Let's bring it all back to the big picture before we sign off.
The big picture is that the liver is a predictable organ. It doesn't act randomly. It reacts to insults in very specific ways.
So rule number 1 was about the enzymes.
Rule 1, the explosion. Early viral infection bursts the cells, which means AST and ALT go way up.
Then comes the swelling. Later, the inflammation blocks the ducts, which means your ALK, phos, GGT, and bili start to rise.
And if you just have the blockage, like from a stone, then the ALK, phos, and bili are the dominant problem from the start.
And for the specific viruses we covered, Hep A is the simple one. Flu leads to jaundice. IgM means now. IgG means gone.
Easy enough.
Hep B, that's the complex Dane particle. HBsAg means the virus is present. HBeAg means it's active and during the window period.
You have to check the core, the IgM anti-HBc.
And finally, Hep D, the parasite that needs the B virus coat. No B, no D.
That's a solid summary.
I have one final question for you, though. A provocative thought, maybe. The window period. We talked about how dangerous it is if you miss it clinically. But in the real world, how often does this happen? Do doctors actually order the core antibody test regularly? Or is it something that often gets skipped because people just rely on the surface antigen?
That is the provocative thought for the day. And it's a really important question. I think it varies. But there's always a risk that in a screening setting, someone might just order the HBsAg. And that raises the question about how many diagnoses might be missed or delayed if you only order a surface antigen test and you skip that crucial core antibody.
Something to mull over next time you see a lab requisition form.
Indeed. When in doubt, always check the core. It's central to the diagnosis.
A huge thanks to the authors of Clinical Microbiology, made ridiculously simple for saving our brains with these cartoons and visual guides. And thank you to you, the listener, for diving deep into the liver's alphabet with us.
Keep looking for the clues. The story's always there in the labs.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.